the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes for the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Tuesday, August 24th in the year 2021. And no matter if you're listening to the audio version of the podcast or if you're watching us on YouTube, I want to thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes a part of your day. On today's episode, we will be joined by Mr. Bobby Carpenter, former Ohio State linebacker, current co-host of the Morning Juice on 97.1 The Fan in Columbus. Him and I had a phenomenal time, a fun time, talking about the Ohio State defense, the changes to it, and a whole lot more. I have told people in the past, told you in the past, we're going to try to keep this guest thing going strong every single Tuesday, even throughout the season, and it's not stopping now. This week is the last full week before the first official game week for the football season. Got a guest today, got another guest lined up for Friday. They were right back to game preparation starting next Monday. Hopefully going to have some guests coming next week to help us prepare for the football season and the game against the Minnesota Golden Gophers. That's enough of me talking. You're not here to hear from me. You want to hear some of what Bobby Carpenter thinks about this year's football team. I'm going to back away, bring in Bobby Carpenter, and allow him to talk about this year's Ohio State defense and a whole lot more. And joining us now here on Locked On Buckeyes, it's a former linebacker at Ohio State. He's currently the co-host of the Morning Juice. That's heard from 6 a.m. until 9 a.m. Eastern time on 97.1 The Fan. It is Bobby Carpenter. Bobby, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Jay. Thanks for having me on, sir.
Yeah, no problem at all. Before we get to the defense, like I mentioned earlier, and the changes that are going to be there, alterations, this whole alliance thing that has been talked about between the Big Ten, Pac-12, and ACC, it has me intrigued, and you as a former player probably have some interesting thoughts about those three conferences forming an alliance possibly very soon.
I'm curious what that alliance actually means. The Pac-12, they don't really have any cachet. They're not really carrying any weight. The Big Ten, obviously, right now has the second best media rights deal to the SEC. Now, they're going to be up for negotiation here soon. They have probably the largest population base that actually still cares about football that will come, because I exclude most of the East Coast and West Coast markets with that. They're bigger, but no one goes to the games and no one watches them on television. So that really doesn't matter. And I don't know what these alliances mean, because I watched Bob Bowlesby, the commissioner of the Big 12, work side by side with Greg Sankey, who during that whole time, during the pandemic, when they're trying to make sure games can be played, they seem to be in lockstep. They're talking about the college football playoff expansion. And then all of a sudden, during that whole time, Greg Sankey had the poison pill in there to be able to allow Oklahoma and Texas into the SEC and get them full shares right away. So right now, I think it's a situation where everybody's kind of out for themselves. The Big Ten's kind of held together more than most conferences just due to the history of it. But we'll see if those relationships begin to fracture, because, I was looking at this. Texas and Oklahoma probably comprise 40 to 50% of the brand value of the Big 12. And so when they're gone, you could see their entire TV deal get cut in half. And for the remainder of the teams that are there, I would say Ohio State probably comprises 25 to 30% of the Big 10 TV deal, which is substantially larger. And so I hope that at some point they'll begin to sway their weight a little bit. And I'm not worried about alliances. I'm worried about making sure that they have the best product that they can possibly put out there. And that means adding elite teams, not just teams that you think will be able to fill out some sort of geographic footprint or ultimately provide more money due to TV buys.
A lot of the talk I've heard has been a lot of scheduling alliances and scheduling packs that these conferences would currently go into. Currently, the ACC schedule is different, more constructed like the SEC schedule. You have the 4 non-conferences, and I believe a lot of them play at FCS level school. How do you think a scheduling pact in this alliance will assist and aid the strength of schedule in the committee voting these schools in the playoff down the road?
Well, that's the thing. It's, the asymmetric with conference games played. The Big Ten plays 9. The Big 12 is playing 9. We'll see how long, obviously, the Big 12 continues to operate, once Texas and Oklahoma and when they decide to jettison. But, the SEC is playing 8. And so as we look at this, and especially as they talk about conference expansion or playoff expansion, it wouldn't surprise me to see the Big Ten potentially ratchet back, to 8 games. I know a 9th game is more profitable TV-wise between Big Ten schools because it locks in what the conference dollars are going to get because they'll own both sides of it. But the problem with that is it limits schools like Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Nebraska to only being able to have 4 games, or essentially 8 home games one year and 7 home games the next year, or 7 every year rather, as opposed to having 8 and 7. So you lose one whole game every 2 years or half a game, which, comprises probably $18 million in revenue dependent upon the school. And so that's real. Also, it allows you to schedule more aggressively because you have more non-conference options to do more of those home and home matchups. So I think they'll begin to change that. I don't necessarily hate the fact that some schools play FCS programs. It's a financial thing for them. Is there really a big difference between playing, an FCS school and a lower tier Sun Belt or MAC school? Like, I really don't believe that there's much for some of these elite schools. So that really doesn't bother me all that much.
Now, interesting thought, because I've always been a person that has been against the FCS level consistently every single year, maybe occasionally, but I think the consistency in it and in the SEC, the way that they schedule theirs latter part of the season, I've always been opposed to that, but never put much stock or much weight into the financial aspect for those FCS schools.
Yeah, that's probably the other aspect, that you talk about. Late, how the SEC does it, it's right before all their big matchups. It gives everyone kind of a bye week late in the season. I'm not really a proponent of that. I mean, you can have your bye weeks here and there, but taking a week off for really most of the conference to play an FCS school, I'm not really a fan of how that structure's set up. But I understand like the financial element of it, and when if the Power 5 kind of break off and then do their own thing, and they don't want to necessarily schedule the Group of 5, which ultimately what I probably see happening is probably some sort of super conference comprised of 20 to 30 teams, 18 to 30 teams. You pick the number, and really it could probably be 20, and they could have their own TV deal, which would be like an NFL light deal, probably in the billions of dollars, $4 to $5 to $6 billion, then only split among 18 to 20 schools, and they just play each other. But that would really hurt the product across the board. So I'm not really an advocate of that. I enjoy the fact that there's 130 FBS schools. It's opportunity for guys, because some of those guys have opportunities as they mature late to still go on and play in the NFL. And I think it's important for them to be able to have resources too.
Absolutely. Transitioning to the current team, the current build up to the season, which starts September the 2nd, Ohio State's defense, the base defense, will look a little different this year from the 4-3 we're used to the 4-2-5. What were your initial thoughts when you heard that Ohio State would be going this route defensively?
Well, it's all about personnel matchups. And so the reason you go to a 4-2-5 is because you're seeing more 11 or 3 wide receiver personnel groupings. And when you see that, you like to match likes. And so you have to get a more athletic guy on the field. And the Sam linebacker position has changed dramatically. That's the guy that typically plays to the strength of the formation set, who's kind of an overhang guy who will stack off of that 3rd wide receiver. And so most teams started, when I was playing, a handful of teams ran the spread. So you're seeing a lot of, pro sets, a lot of 2 tight end sets, maybe even Wisconsin, Michigan and Iowa, maybe 2 back, 2 tight end, maybe 3 tight end sets. So your Sam linebackers looked like me. They're a little bigger. As it's kind of moved on, you get some guys like, the Pete Warners out there, the Darren Lees that are former converted safeties, a little bit smaller that can run. And so they're almost a hybrid type player anyway. And so when they see, 3 wide receiver sets, you're going to see more of, their 4-2-5. Now, when they play, Wisconsin, they play the Iowas, the Illinois of the world, schools like that like to line up and pound the football, you're going to go back to more 4-3 stuff. So it's really going to be dependent upon who you're playing. And then who are your best 11 and how are you going to try to structure and get those guys on the field the most productive way?
For a linebacker yourself, and then for the linebackers that are here now, some of these guys play a more variable on defense in high school. Some of them play more 4-3 style. The transition from going from a 4-3 Mike to a 4-2-5 Mike, is that a difficult transition?
Not really, because most of the schools now, I mean, and they still run, a traditional, more of an old school running offensive attack, but just about everybody's running the spread now. And so, as we look at it defensively, it's just like X's on a board, whether it's a linebacker, whether it's a defensive lineman, whether it's, a safety, whatever it might be. Hey, we're moving these 11 around to try to match. And now what type of body types are we putting there? So the Mike linebacker is typically going to be the middle piece at that second level. And so whether he has, a linebacker outside of him to each side, one DB, one linebacker, maybe two defensive backs, like they all fit the same way in coverage, in your zone coverages. And then in your man coverage, you're going to try to, we always joke with it, like find the guy that looks most like you. If you're 250 pounds, find the dude that's 250 pounds. If you're, 210, go find the smaller, go find the wide receiver, whatever it might be. So match likes, and that's what they try to do. And so whether you're playing in a 4-2-5 or a 4-3 in high school, there's probably not a big difference. It's really the type of offense that you're playing against and what you're being asked to kind of do in that system.
Lately, as I've been thinking, getting closer to the season, this thought's been in my head, and I've wondered, and I don't know if you have any insight to this, if Ryan Day would have gone this route last year, switching from a 4-3 to a 4-2-5, if they had a full, complete offseason with the COVID, everything was altered, offseason training and preparation was completely different than anybody else I'd ever thought it would be throughout any offseason in college football. So I'm wondering if you know any insight or if you thought maybe the switch would have happened last year during the offseason prior to this year, changing the base defense.
Well, I think part of it is they didn't necessarily, by the end of the season, have the DBs. Cameron Brown, pops his Achilles. Sean Wade was beaten up. If everybody looks and wants to bang on Tough Borland at the end of the season for giving up the play to Devontae Smith down the seam in the national championship game, and number one, you don't necessarily want that matchup, but number two, if you have an experienced safety there, your free safety, he's going to help out the linebacker. He's going to identify the mismatch. Hey, it's a bad call for this coverage. They got us, and so now how do we mitigate this and make sure it's not it's just a mild loss and not a huge loss on our defense? And so they had Marcus Williamson playing essentially free safety there. He's played cornerback. He's played nickelback. He was thrust into that role, and I'm watching it. I'm like, why is he there? And, talking to some of the guys, we didn't have anybody else. There's no one else available. Like, we're looking for warm bodies. And so last year, just with COVID and guys being out and injuries happening and all these different things, sometimes you're restricted with what you can run by the personnel that you actually have available. And that's why you see in the NFL sometimes where you can only carry 53, like, hey, we have a fifth wide receiver who, in high school and college, he played a little DB. And this week we try to get 6 DBs on the field. We got to get him over there. And we're going to ask him to do a very little amount, but we're going to try to put him in a box so that we can have that extra athletic body to be able to do it. So last year, even if they really wanted to, outside of just, not having a full off season and being able to do it, by the end of the season, I don't know if they would have truly had the bodies to be able to have the type of personnel groupings out there that you wanted.
Linebackers this year, who do you expect to start, and how do you think that they'll start early on? I know Minnesota and Oregon, it's kind of a difficult test early on for guys that really haven't seen much playing time.
Yeah, they have a unique group. They've got some young guys, they've got some older guys, but none of them have a ton of experience. Tommy Eichenberg's been hurt. I know he's played really well during camp. Cody Simon, who I think if it would have been a normal season last year, probably would have got on the field some then. Taraja Mitchell's really stepped up and looked good. I mean, he's your traditional in-the-box player, physical run thumper. You've got Kayvon Pope, who's really athletic, a good blitzer. And here's what I think they're going to end up doing. And it's a testament to Al Washington. It's tough sometimes because a linebackers come in all shapes and sizes. A lot of position groups do. But a linebacker's like, how do you utilize the guy's traits that they're best at? Whether they're a great box run stuffer, maybe they're really athletic on the edge, maybe a guy's great in coverage, maybe a guy's a great blitzer, maybe they have a combination of 2 or 3 of those things. But, to have guys that do them all is very, very rare and do them all well. And so it comes down to, okay, who are your starters? Well, who's in the first play of the game or who's playing most of the game? And I think ultimately what probably Al will do is he's going to rotate a lot of these guys by situation, who they're playing, what type of offense it is, what you're being asked to do. And so the guys that I kind of mentioned, I see those guys probably playing a large role in this. I really like Steele. I think Steele Chambers can be a guy that contributes and plays. Flipped him over from offense. I think he's going to be good. He's just got a pretty steep learning curve now since he hasn't played much linebacker in college. But those guys, pretty talented players, and I think they'll have a really good shot at being impactful guys this year.
You mentioned Steele Chambers, and between him and then Gaoteote, the transfer from USC, there's some excitement there for me because I think Steele Chambers is a good player, just needs some consistency. I know some fans were really upset with the fumbles he had last year, and when you're getting limited time, those things kind of happen and derail how often you can be on the field. But the USC transfer, I'm high on. I just wonder how durable he will be, and also if the NCAA will grant his waiver for him to play this year. So those two guys, to me, I'm really interested to see if they get on the field, and if they do, how they perform for the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Well, the good news, Jay, for Steele Chambers is on defense, you can't fumble the ball unless you've already picked it up and had an interception or a fumble recovery. So he's got that going for him. So if he fumbles after that, he's already done something that's at least reasonably good. So I think he'll be fine. There, Gaoteote, the transfer from USC, he can do some things well. He came in here. Ohio State runs a really tight program. And West Coast guys, I always joke with them, because they've got some at Ohio State. They're a little bit different. It's a little more laid back, and they have to kind of be institutionalized the way things operate at Ohio State and operate off of the West Coast. I think it was a little more laid back out there at USC. Mickey Marotti runs like a tight ship as far as your physique, your expectations in the weight room, and he didn't get any of that this offseason. So I think he's got a little bit of ways to go to kind of transform his body to be able to take the pounding and be able to perform like he wants to. Very gifted athlete. I think can contribute, but I don't know if I would anticipate him playing, right away to start the season.
You mentioned physique, and we're going to end it off on this part here. Not just a quarterback specifically, because I've heard Stroud's gained some weight, some good body weight that he's gained. Kyle McCord, Jack Miller, they've all put on some good muscle, some good weight in the offseason. Quinn Ewers comes in, new kid. Trayvon Henderson comes in. Their body types are different. I don't remember seeing pictures from Henderson when he first arrived on campus, but from seeing pictures in camp, he looks like he is not your typical 18-year-old freshman running back. No matter if it's a Power 5 school, no matter, no typical 18-year-old looks like that. Quinn Ewers looks like a guy who looks like a senior in high school. As a former player, what is the importance of the physique and the off-season conditioning and workouts to make sure your body is ready for the grueling season?
Well, I think it's paramount, number one, because even if you play quarterback, you're going to get hit. And so part of the reason why do quarterbacks need to lift? Well, there's an athletic component of it, being strong, being able to cut and run, but also to be able to absorb, contact and being put together. So every time you get hit, you don't get hurt. And so, Quinn Ewers, most quarterbacks, they don't lift a ton. There's, an element of a hurdle that they need to kind of get over. And, he came in here, he's got some work to do, and he'll put it on. Like Joe Burrow looked scrawny and skinny when he got to Ohio State. By the time he was a senior at LSU, looked like a full-grown man. And you've seen that process already happen with, Kyle McCord, and Stroud had a little bit different. He was a little softer and had to really kind of add some muscle weight to be able to kind of, increase his athleticism and be put together. But, Trayvon Henderson, he's a dude, man. He was, the number one running back in the country, didn't play his senior year because they didn't have a football. And so there's two options there. He could have sat around and been a fat turd and just, eaten all day and not done anything. I think I'm going to Ohio State. But it was obvious that he took the latter. I think they got him, some workout routines. And then it's up to the guy of how driven you are. Like he loves the weight room. Justin Fields loved the weight room. Dude, when I watched him walk in there, I'm like, this guy likes to lift. I can tell right now by the way he carries himself in here. He's not just in here trying to survive. I mean, Justin Fields, you roll under squat 315, no problem. And get after it and like doing it. And so guys that enjoy the weight room, they're going to have bigger gains. Their body's going to change quicker, and it's going to show. And so I think that, Trayvon Henderson, arriving at Ohio State, that's a function and a testament to him as a young man being able to take things seriously and know that, it may be uncomfortable because change, Jay, is uncomfortable and you're sore and it doesn't feel good. But if you want to be the best you can, man, you got to start, peeling off those layers of skin and really, trying to mold some new ones.
Absolutely. Little goofy question here to end things off. How close are you to lifting like you did in college?
Oh gosh, in my mind, I'm right there. Except as soon as I try to lift, then my body begins to slowly fall apart. So I just turned 38. I mean, I work out in the morning. Getting ready to go coach, some flag football with Joey Galloway. Our boys play together, and like Joey's mid 40s and still lifts and runs hard. So that's like my goal is to always kind of stay with him and try to make sure that I can be as close to him as possible. But ultimately the injuries catch up to you, and you've got to find a way to kind of lift around them, mitigate them. And I still like to go in there now that everything's open and you'll start working back out with the guys again. It's just, you got to be smart about what you can do, because the days you feel good are the days you go hard, and the days you go a little too hard, the next day you can't do anything again. And so it's a fine balance, man. You get a lot of injuries, and it just kind of, it's like an old car, man. Like, you got to let that thing warm up for about 15 minutes sometimes.
Beating Joey, beating him in a race is going to be pretty tough.
Oh, I probably won't be able to beat Joey in a race. I don't know if I'll ever. I mean, because I would like to think when I'm probably like 45 and he's 55, I might be able to get him then. But that'll probably be where it's at. And I might have to trip him off the start too, because he can still fly.
Yes, he can. Bobby Carpenter, this has been really fun. Where can people catch you on Twitter if they want to follow along with you in the offseason and during the football season as well?
Yeah, so you can follow me, bcarp3 on Twitter. I'm on Instagram at Bobby Carpenter, and then the Roman numeral 3. Just signed a deal with Outkick to be doing some writing and some stuff for them, podcasting and video stuff during the season, and then on 97.1 The Fan. So doing a lot of different stuff this year, Jay. I'm pretty excited about it.
Excited about the football season, excited about what you're doing, and excited you're able to come on Locked On Buckeyes. Bobby Carpenter, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime.
And that's all she wrote. Once again, I want to thank Bobby Carpenter for coming on the show and filling us in on some things going on with the Ohio State defense this year. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. You can follow Bobby Carpenter on Twitter at bcarp3. You can send your emails to jstevens317 at gmail.com. Feel free to text me, 850-462-5442 as well. So many ways to continue the conversation outside of the space here on this here podcast. Got some big things lined up for the rest of the week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Come back on those days to find out what we have going on the podcast to prepare us for the beginning of the Ohio State football season. And as always, go Bucks!